All right, so today we're going to dive into some education around XRP, one of the favorite topics here on the show, of course. And my name is Paul Barron. Welcome back to TechPath. Joining me today is Matt Hamilton, who is with, of course, Ripple Labs, and he's going to dive into all this. Matt, great to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, Matt, let's go into it a little deep because we get two types of XRP viewers and listeners here on this show. One is the very educated version of the XRP army that has a full history and full understanding of where XRP is going. And then we get people that are constantly asking about what is it and how does it differ from other cryptocurrencies, other projects that are out there. If you could kind of go into just a short history of XRP and Ripple.
Sure. Yeah, glad to. So XRP is a digital asset that lives on the XRP Ledger. The XRP Ledger is a decentralized, permissionless, open blockchain created originally in 2011 and went live in 2012. It was originally developed by a trio of Bitcoin developers who were after something more environmentally friendly than Bitcoin. They understood that the energy usage that the proof of work protocol used was not necessarily sustainable. And so they looked to find a consensus algorithm that still retained the decentralized nature and the peer-to-peer nature of Bitcoin, but without the energy consumption that Bitcoin requires. So kind of fast forward to today, and XRP is one of the most widely supported cryptocurrencies on a whole number of exchanges worldwide. And the XRP Ledger is being used for many different use cases, predominantly around payments and moving value around, but also moving into other areas such as NFTs and tokenization. One of the things people may not realize is that the XRP Ledger was the first blockchain to have a decentralized exchange built into the ledger, and was the first blockchain to allow the tokenization of other assets. So it's had like stable coins, USD, Euro, stable coins, and things like effectively wrapped Bitcoin, pegged Bitcoin since 2012.
So that far back in terms of just understanding kind of the environmental challenges that Bitcoin would face, that's quite a bit. I mean, that's 10 years ago. I think a lot of people were not necessarily ready for or even understood the mining protocols and requirements that were going to be out and definitely coming out in the future, especially at that time, which Bitcoin, of course, was at 2-3 cycles ago in terms of how Bitcoin's future was looking. So that was pretty heavy in foresight to be able to understand kind of the direction of that. How important is that today? Is this pretty much the strategy for XRP and all of its development moving forward is to continue to kind of stay on this ESG track?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like you say, it was quite a prescient move, and to be honest, it probably wasn't one of the primary motivations at the start. I mean, the idea was to have something more efficient than Bitcoin and that could process transactions much quicker than Bitcoin. So transactions on the XRP Ledger are complete within about 3 to 4 seconds, as opposed to 10 minutes or up to an hour if you have to wait for confirmations on the Bitcoin network. So, but as you say, Bitcoin has moved on several sort of cycles now in the kind of halvening cycles, and the amount of mining power has increased and increased and increased. Right. And that has started to coalesce now around entities that are able to afford to set up large mining facilities. So you've got economics of scale, you've got the efficiency of dedicated mining hardware. So moving away from kind of Bitcoin's original idea of an egalitarian network to a network, and really, unless you have the ability to kind of set up these large facilities, you can't really play in that space. And so, I mean, the XRP Ledger, because it's decentralized and it doesn't have the mining functionality, the transactions are confirmed by a set of decentralized validators across the network, that it is actually a lot more efficient. And these days, it's obviously an even bigger concern. And we've seen over the past year that the environmental aspect has really been coming to the fore now, especially when you look at things like NFTs. You've seen a lot of artists say, well, I'd love to mint NFTs, but I might as well just go and burn down a rainforest, right? They've been talking about the environmental impact of blockchains, and a lot of them may not be aware that there's other blockchains besides Bitcoin or Ethereum, and things like the XRP Ledger are much more efficient in doing transactions.
So explain the relationship, because I think sometimes people maybe don't necessarily understand kind of the dual track that XRP is on versus Bitcoin, and what its core infrastructure and architecture really surrounds in terms of the development. Can you talk a little bit about the development community itself? Who all's involved? How many projects are you guys working with? Things of that nature. Anything that kind of surfaces to the top that would give you kind of that loose opportunity that Bitcoin doesn't necessarily have in terms of its development of the blockchain itself.
Right. So, like I said, the XRP Ledger was originally created in sort of 2011, went live 2012, and was originally developed by a trio of developers. Those developers, originally Bitcoin developers, then went on to form a company called Ripple. That's a company that I now work for. Now, Ripple's focus, so the XRP Ledger is, like I said, it's decentralized, and its entire point is point-to-point, peer-to-peer payments without needing a central authority. So exactly the same use case as Bitcoin. But the Ripple, the company, took a slightly different track to maybe what a lot of the Bitcoin community are working towards. And that is, rather than saying, okay, we need to tear down the original existing financial system, we need to try and transform the financial system. So Ripple has been working with banks, with financial institutions, money transmitters, regulated entities to allow them to use a decentralized permissionless network, which is the XRP Ledger. So it's coming at it from a different angle, but it's ultimately doing the same thing to bring about, a level playing field with peer-to-peer transactions. Now, in terms of development, Ripple are heavily involved in the development of the network, but Ripple don't control the network and they don't control the development. Ripple only run a few % of the nodes on the network and only have a few % of the voting power in order to enact new features on the network. So the XRP Ledger has a decentralized governance model, and the validators of the network need to actually vote to approve any changes to the protocol or any new features that are brought in to the network. And there's a lot of developers out there. So there's a development company called XRPL Labs, which is based in the Netherlands, for example. And they're working on an amendment called Hooks, which brings smart contract functionality to the XRP Ledger. As I mentioned before, the XRP Ledger was the first blockchain to have a decentralized exchange and allow tokenization. So a lot of the functionality that, say, blockchains like Ethereum require smart contracts for, the XRP Ledger actually has built in as native functionality in the core of the network. So you don't need smart contracts for that functionality. However, obviously, there's certain things you do need smart contracts for. And originally, Ripple worked on a project called Codius, which was a off-chain smart contracts platform. Well, Hooks is bringing smart contracts functionality on-chain. And like I said, is being developed by a completely independent entity in the Netherlands called XRPL Labs that are creating that as an enhancement to the XRP Ledger, which should be hopefully coming later this year. So there's a lot of other companies that are working on things with the XRP Ledger. There's companies like Coil, who do web monetization. So the idea that your web browser can dynamically stream payment to a content creator. So you could be reading a blog post or watching a video, and literally as you are reading it or watching it, your web browser is sending, 1/100th of a cent every second you're watching the video. So that's a company called Coil that are working on that. There's another example. There's a company called Forte that are a gaming company, and they're using XRP and the XRP Ledger within the gaming side of things. There's a company called Casino Coin that is working on kind of casino and betting and that side of things for the XRP Ledger. So there's a whole range of companies doing sort of different things. You might have seen recently that Ripple has made an investment in Mintable, and Mintable is a NFT marketplace, and you can mint NFTs on the XRP Ledger as well. So that's a whole other area that's now kind of evolving as well, people moving into that area with the XRP Ledger.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people understand the legacy of XRP and just how far ahead of everybody you guys have essentially moved, because you've had a chance to break it and fix it a lot of times, and really understand the pitfalls of developing on the blockchain. So all of those are very good use case scenarios. When you look at smart contracts, this is, I think, where the big rub is right now in terms of people understanding the differences between, say, an XRP, and let's go back and look at Ethereum and where maybe ETH2 is going to be going with smart contracts. And some of the other projects, whether you look at Cardano, who's rolling out Alonzo this year, this year we hope, and then you've got Solana and even Polygon, who both have really kind of moved into this space. Kind of position XRP in the middle of that pack, or maybe it's a completely different angle of where some of those alt projects are going. Can you kind of explain the differences there?
Sure. So what I would say is, I would say that the XRP Ledger is positioned to be kind of like the best blockchain for tokenization. Right, tokenization of assets. Now, as I said, the XRP Ledger was the first blockchain to allow tokenization of assets, and there's been things like gold and silver tokenized on the XRP Ledger for many years now,
Right.
euros, US dollars, et cetera, and other cryptocurrencies. Ethereum is actually tokenized on the XRP Ledger. Bitcoin is tokenized on the XRP Ledger. So yes, this is the thing, that the XRP Ledger was so far ahead of most of the other blockchains. I mean, the XRP Ledger existed before Ethereum did. Vitalik Buterin, the creator of Ethereum, actually tried to intern at Ripple right in the early days. So the XRP Ledger was so far ahead, but I think what has happened is that people are not aware of the functionality with the XRP Ledger. As you say, we've had a chance to kind of build it, break it, build it again. And in some ways, I say this in the nicest possible way, but sometimes the XRP Ledger is possibly perceived as boring because it just works, right? It hasn't got to deal with a lot of the big dramatic issues that, say, Bitcoin and Ethereum have to do. So Ethereum's moving to proof of stake. That's a massive thing at the moment that's taking up a lot of development time. Bitcoin is building second layer solutions to fix the scaling problem. The XRP Ledger hasn't had to deal with any of those issues. So in some regards, it might be seen as like boring to some people just because it works, right? And so sometimes it's a little difficult to kind of say to people, hey, look, we've got all of this. We've been doing all of this. It just works.
Right.
So, and a lot of times as well, it's to do with terminology, right? The XRP Ledger existed, again, before all of these other systems, and before a lot of the terminology within the industry existed. So the concept of stable coins and tokenization, the XRP Ledger was doing it beforehand, but we called it issued assets, or we called it IOUs. We didn't call it tokens or stable coins, but it's exactly the same thing. Just we created a different terminology, and people are not necessarily aware that it's the same thing. So one of the big focuses, from my point of view, from developer advocacy, is to kind of look at the terminology we use, the terminology that the rest of the industry is using, and basically just try to realign our messaging such that people are aware that the XRP Ledger has this functionality there and has had it for the longest time.
When you talk about the fact that many of the projects that are under development right now, in many cases, 2021 is going to be a banner year, I think, in terms of some of these projects coming out with their ability to essentially kind of match up to what XRP has already had the ability to do. Here's my question. With the fact that you guys have pretty much been in that driver's seat for quite a while, the ability to kind of plug in to these infrastructure opportunities down the road, whether it's DeFi or whether it's doing things in NFT or around the gaming and or even gambling industries. Is there one particular area that you feel like maybe XRP is really suited for, especially from a developer aspect, that somebody that's coming in and saying, hey, I'm going to develop a new project onto XRP, how would you direct them, especially with what you've seen in the marketplace? Because this is a big thing right now. Banks are trying to figure out how to essentially plug into blockchain. We've got so many companies that are now starting to utilize blockchain in many other aspects. Projects are spinning up left and right. What is it that you guys can bring to the market to kind of help those developers in this very critical period of time? Because you technically have the tools to do it today.
Yeah. I would say, kind of maybe slightly reiterate, what I've said, tokenization. That's the main thing. If you want to tokenize something as part of your development effort, part of what you're doing, then really the XRP Ledger is the easiest way to do that. And one of the most secure ways, because you don't need to create a smart contract to tokenize something. If you want to run something like an ICO, or you want to issue a central bank digital currency or a stable coin, or you want to wrap another cryptocurrency because you want something that can transact faster using the XRP Ledger, then the XRP Ledger is really the place to go to, and it makes it much simpler to do that kind of development. There's a company, for example, called Spend the Bits that actually has a Bitcoin wallet that uses the XRP Ledger, and it's for transacting Bitcoin peer-to-peer, but it uses the XRP Ledger rather than the Bitcoin blockchain because it's faster, right? And it's got more liquidity on it than using something like Lightning. So, these kind of things, and it's been around a lot longer and, a lot more battle tested, right? So, that's the kind of area that I would say it really shines in, the really kind of focus. If you're looking to tokenize any kind of asset and you're looking for fast transaction times, low cost. I mean, the fees on the XRP Ledger, you're talking thousandths of a cent rather than say $5, $10, $20, whatever it is. We've seen Ethereum peak up. I've seen people doing transactions and, trying to spend $150 fee to withdraw $100 of Ethereum, right? The XRP Ledger, it's thousandths of a cent. So anything that you want the performance, you want the scalability, you want the low fees, for doing anything around tokenization, that's where I would say is the sweet spot for the XRP Ledger.
So I'm trying to think, would this be considered something similar to blockchain as a service? We've seen this kind of floating around, Corda, a couple of other companies that have kind of moved in this direction around blockchain platforms as a general, because you've got the ability to kind of go in a lot of different directions here, especially with the secure capabilities that have similarities to smart contracts. Would that be an easy way to explain it for those out there that in terms of developing on XRP?
Yes and no. The difficulty with saying things like blockchain as a service is that implies that there is some entity that is offering that service, right? Now, like I said, the XRP Ledger is decentralized. Anybody can use it. However, one of the things that Ripple has been working on is the idea of sidechains. So with sidechains, you'd be able to run your own effectively private XRP Ledger on the side of the main XRP Ledger, and you would potentially have more control of that. So you could use that and create effectively a blockchain as a service entity using that. So you could have something that could spin up these private ledgers on the side of the main ledger that maybe you have a bit more jurisdictional control over. Now, obviously, with all of these things, that's then a balance between decentralization and control. If you run your own sidechain, then it's up to you to ensure that there are sufficient number of nodes on that network to make it as decentralized as you want it to be. But on the converse side, some people, decentralization might not be their primary concern. And so they're happy to run their own separate network rather than using the main network, which is very decentralized. They could run their own separate network in which they could issue their own token on there, or could develop their own functionality that doesn't have to go through the decentralized governance that the rest of the main network has to go through.
So overall, what is the network consisting of today? If you looked at the scope of XRP as a whole, because of its age, a lot of it refer to it kind of as the OG when you look at blockchain development. What is the scope of it today?
What, in terms of the size of the network?
Size, yeah.
So the network there's about 900,000, something like that, nodes on the network spread geographically. And those nodes are run by universities, exchanges, individuals, anybody who wants to have a connection to the network. Now, one of the things that people notice is that there's not necessarily as many nodes on the XRP Ledger as there are, say, Bitcoin or Ethereum. But one of the big differences with the XRP Ledger is that node operators are not directly financially incentivized to run a node. So with Ethereum or Bitcoin, you can actually make a business just out of running a node, right? And you can basically operate something effectively like a rent-seeking arrangement in which you get paid just to operate the node, irrespective of what you plan to do with it. Whereas with the XRP Ledger, there's no direct incentive to run a node. So those that run nodes are those that actually have other incentives to be a part of the network. So they run a business, they run a wallet, they run an exchange. They are committed to the long-term health and operation of the network. And what that means is, whilst there's a smaller number of nodes, they're a lot more aligned with the rest of the network and with the users. You don't get this kind of battle between, say, on Bitcoin, you have like miners that want high fees because they get more profit, and users that want low fees because they want cheap transactions. Whereas with the XRP Ledger, the fees remain low because you don't have that kind of rent-seeking type arrangement in which you have entities that are trying to raise the price because they will get more transaction fees.
Yeah, Matt, when you look at that, because that's a good point, is just the business models that are out there in terms of, especially around Bitcoin and Ethereum, from a node aspect. When you look at that though, to be able to get to critical mass, let's kind of look into the future. We kind of get, because right now I feel like blockchain is very much like the Wild West right now. We have just so many projects. We don't really know what projects are going to stick. So many new developments of existing projects that are trying to fix and somewhat repair, limitations that the project has had. Obviously, we're talking about Ethereum, Bitcoin. But when you look at kind of the infrastructure that blockchain has pretty much unleashed on, the world, there's a big opportunity here for future tokenization opportunities that could just go any way your imagination could run. What do you think is, if there was a hurdle that XRP had to overcome, maybe in scalability, where do you feel like the network would need to grow to let's say, everything is, back to roses with XRP, we're head down, we're really moving on creating new development partnerships, all those kind of things, and plugging into real use case scenarios. How big do you think XRP needs to be able to handle that kind of opportunity?
Well, I think the ledger itself is in a very good position to handle that. I mean, the ledger itself can, scale.
As of today?
As of today, yeah. So the ledger itself can scale much greater, and the amount of, the transactions that are going through, because the transactions are so fast and the block times are so fast, it's actually able to handle a lot higher, throughput than say Bitcoin or Ethereum is. Now, currently, XRP, there's about $2 billion of XRP traded daily, making it one of the most liquid assets out there. And it's approved for like legitimate regulatory use in the likes of UK, Switzerland, Japan, Singapore. Right. So, it already has overcome a lot of the hurdles that maybe some of the other newer platforms have got to deal with. So, Bitcoin's supported on about, 90% of the top 25 global exchanges, again, about 90% of the top 25 wallets. So if you're bringing in a new asset, you've got to not only just bring in that asset and the functionality and the blockchain, but you've got to also convince all of the exchanges to support it.
Exactly.
The wallets to support it, potentially regulatory environments to support it as well. Well, XRP has kind of got past a lot of that, right? So really in terms of kind of what it is there that's kind of getting in the way, I don't really see a huge amount. I mean, Ripple, you may have heard recently from, within Ripple, that we're looking to expand beyond just international payments. So we're looking to expand into tokenization, moving value in general, which aligns with kind of our original goal of the Internet of Value, right? This whole idea that, I can stream down live video feed from the International Space Station right now, but still, if I'm trying to send a payment across the world, it still might take 3 days, 5 days, and still might, cost me 7% in fees. So that's kind of, we're still trying to deal with that, right? That's still a problem that needs fixing, but we're looking wider than just the concept of payments and remittance companies as well. So direct companies being able to make payments between each other, for example. And this is kind of just, continuing further down this path of the Internet of Value that we originally started on.
Yeah, and I think where you guys, when I say you, Ripple and XRP in general, you're really in a position right now that is very prime, because right now, I think for the first time, we've got a little bit of an awakening to the mainstream public on at least cryptocurrency in general. They don't necessarily understand blockchain to a certain extent, but they understand what a Bitcoin is and kind of this is a store of value. There are, and it's starting to create that inquisitive nature of our human species, which I think the next step is, I want to know how this stuff works. Everybody did not understand how, simple ACH or even what SWIFT was, 10 years ago, but anybody in their financial business today understands how SWIFT works and, all those kind of mechanisms that a bank system needs to use. When you look at, and you guys are really primed, you're ready to plug into almost any kind of scenario use case. with it ready to go and capable of handling the expansion of potential transactions there. When you look at that and you say, all right, the greatest opportunity here, everybody, of course, points to DeFi for decentralized finance. But do you see other opportunities? I know you mentioned NFT. We talked about content creator, monetization. There's a lot of different projects that are kind of going in that direction. We've looked at Audius with podcasting and sound and music and all those kind of things. How would Ripple apply to those various industries in a way? Do you feel like you have I guess the question is, do you have a strong enough developer base to be able to kind of really explode the use case opportunities?
I think so. And as you say, there's a lot more of an awakening and a lot more of an awareness now, right? In the general public, but also with financial institutions, with regulatory institutions. Right. They're starting to wake up now. You're starting to see banks are allowing custody of digital assets. You're still, but it's a weird one still, right? We're still hearing like banks closing down personal accounts for trading digital assets or making payments to exchanges. So we're still not quite there yet, but think about where we were 5-6 years ago.
Exactly.
Ripple were approaching financial institutions and say, hey, look, there's this stuff called cryptocurrency, and the financial institutions were going, whoa, we can't go anywhere near that. Whereas now it's not so much, they're not slamming the door. They're saying, okay, we're interested. We're a little bit curious. We still don't quite know. But, they're starting to wake up now. And as you say, so are the general public. And things like NFTs has been a massive push in the general public consensus about this thing. And, with NFTs, I guess like all technologies, we're kind of at the phase where, you kind of throw everything at the wall and see what sticks at the moment, right? I mean, that's what's happening with this technology. We don't know where NFTs are going to go in the future. We don't know what the killer use case is going to be for NFTs, right? Not everybody is going to be selling $60 million pieces of artwork, right? We know that. So, what is the everyday person going to be doing with NFTs? CryptoKitties kind of set the original, that was kind of the OG of the first thing of NFTs. Yeah, that's cute, but where do we go from here? And the business models are starting to form now. People are starting to look at these things and say, okay, what if I'm a band and I issue an NFT and people who have that NFT get backstage access or a shout out on the label or whatever it might be, right? They're starting to see some of these new business models come into play. And similarly with the XRP Ledger and with XRP, the transaction time is so fast that it's enabling a whole new range of business possibilities that weren't there, right? Yep. If you've got to make a payment, even going back to something like trade finance, if you've got to make a payment and that payment takes 5 days and costs you several $100s to make that payment, then you're going to batch those payments up to much larger payments. Whereas if that payment takes 3 seconds and costs you, fractions of a cent, then you can make those payments much faster, much more regularly. And so that's going to change your whole supply chain and change how your business operates. So the likes of Coil doing streaming monetization, web monetization, well, their play is let's get rid of advertising, right? Because advertising is the main model by which content is monetized today on the web. And the more an advertiser knows about you, the more valuable your eyeballs are to them, right? So if they know that, I'm a 40-something-year-old guy, I live in the UK and I'm interested in motorbikes, then they can sell me an advert much more relevant to me. And so that's worth a lot more, right? So it's in their interest to collect as much personal information about me as possible. Whereas, imagine you've got a scenario where your web browser is directly paying, then you don't have to deal with that. And people say, well, why should I pay for content? Well, they're starting to wake up to the fact that they are already paying for it, just in a slightly more subversive way than maybe they realize. So it's opening up all these new business models, right? You go to an airport and you go and switch on your laptop and try and get onto the Wi-Fi, and you're greeted with a page and you've got to put in, your credit card and all your address details and all this lot to buy, 30 minutes worth of Wi-Fi there for some exorbitant price at the airport, right? Well, the reason you've got to put all those details in is because they need to process your credit card transaction. And the reason that you need to buy half an hour's worth or an hour's worth or a day's worth is because it's not economical for them to charge you just, 50 cents. They have to charge you $5 or $15 because the transaction fees are so high. Whereas if you've got a system where, well, hey, look, I can literally buy per byte or per bit of data, then it's a whole different business model, right? And I don't need to collect any user data. My browser pays, the data comes down. If I stop paying, the data stops. It's as simple as that, right? So it enables a whole different set of business models there. Just the speed and the low fees on the ledger.
So, okay, so you're referencing to transaction fees and speeds that really kind of differentiate Ripple and XRP from kind of the masses. But if you look at, things like the Lightning Network, so that would be, I would say, a bit of an argument there in the sense of how it layers in on top of Bitcoin. How would that compare to something that's happening over on XRP in terms of, because obviously the Lightning Network is very, I guess that's their game, in the sense of speed, transaction flow, the ability to move, massive transactions at very low cost. How would you compare the two?
So, I mean, Lightning is there as a necessity, right? It's there to solve that performance scalability.
Exactly.
And you don't necessarily see that problem on the XRP ledger, so you don't necessarily need that second layer. That being said, the XRP ledger does have payment channels, which are very similar to the payment channels used to form the Lightning Network. And so the XRP ledger has had this for years, and it's what things like Coil that I mentioned that are doing the streaming live payments use. So, that is able to scale, theoretically infinitely because it's direct point-to-point connections, and then you settle up later on the ledger, similarly to the way Lightning works. Now, this has been in production now for 3 or 4 years on the XRP ledger, that people have been using this in business. So, my kind of comparison would be that we've got a lot of functionality. We've had it for ages. It's working. I'm not quite sure what Lightning necessarily brings to the table in that regards. Right now, Lightning is a necessity for Bitcoin because Bitcoin can't scale to the same level of performance like the XRP ledger. My judgment is reserved on Lightning because you still need to open and close the channels underneath, right? So you still need to make an on-chain transaction to open and close the channels.
Exactly.
And some people say, well, we'll just keep the channels open. Well, my thing is, well, okay, I walk into the coffee shop to pay my coffee or whatever I'm using Lightning for. What if the other end has closed my channel, right? So the coffee shop has closed the channel because they want to cash out some of the money.
Right.
So if they've closed out the channel, suddenly I can't use Lightning, and I've got to then set up a new channel, which is going to take me 10 minutes, an hour, whatever it's going to take, and cost $5 or whatever to open that channel. Now, if we just all retain channels and keep them all open, well, that's one thing, but you're effectively then losing the key criteria, the key, properties of Bitcoin that make it unique, right? And that is the blockchain itself. Well, if you're just passing IOUs around and not doing that, then, that's why would you use Bitcoin anyway? Or why would you use the blockchain?
Right.
Why don't you just transact, some Bitcoin IOU on some centralized service instead?
Yeah. So payment channels kind of solve that. I mean, essentially, it is what Lightning is essentially doing, but doing it in a much more efficient manner.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about security, because that's the other layer that everyone, of course, is always striving to, especially when you look at a blockchain, core blockchain, like what XRP essentially is. How secure is this? What are the potentials for any kind of potential breach?
So, okay, there's no such thing as absolute security, obviously, in any computer system or whatever. But what I will say is the XRP ledger, like I said, it's decentralized. There's nearly 1,000 nodes across the globe running the ledger, and there's no one entity that has unilateral control over it. Now, one of the unique things about the XRP ledger is that transactions are deterministically settled, deterministically final, rather than probabilistically settled like they are with Bitcoin. So with Bitcoin, when you make a transaction and the block time is on average 10 minutes, you then need to wait a certain number of confirmations to ensure that that transaction is not effectively overwritten by a longer chain on the blockchain that's being mined by somebody else. So most exchanges will wait for something like 6 transactions or 6 confirmations. So that's an hour you're waiting. Whereas with the XRP ledger, the transaction finality is deterministic and immediate. So 3 or 4 seconds, the transaction is final. It can't get overwritten. So in terms of if you're something like an exchange or a wallet or any kind of entity receiving payment, then from your point of view, the XRP ledger is much more secure because that payment is deemed final within 3 or 4 seconds rather than
Right.
having to wait an hour. So in that regards, I would say that the XRP ledger is much more secure than something like Bitcoin in practical, terms to a merchant.
Just because of the speed of the transaction of finalization, where Bitcoin, of course, is floating around a bit on the chain until those confirmations are done. That's interesting. So, all right, so with that kind of scenario, and the more I talk to you about understanding the depth in which our XRP has kind of moved in terms of solving, transactions, speed, obviously sustainability, the capacity to be able to grow and scale, what is really holding back the institutions? Because when you look at the core functionality of our financial system, we'll just go back to finance, because that's usually kind of the basis in which all these things are built. What is holding back? Because you look at the financial system as it is today, if you look at the ways that we do ACH or SWIFT or any kind of wire transfers, all of this is such a slow and lethargic system, in some cases just painstakingly and very open to breach. Why would these people, and I say people, banks, institution, financial, all businesses, not just be adopting blockchain at just a record pace right now? Because this seems as though we've solved the problem and it's right in front of us, we just aren't using it.
Sure. I would say there's probably two reasons for that. One is the regulatory uncertainty. How are digital assets and blockchains and that, how are they regulated, right? As we know, Ripple are in, a legal case at the moment with the SEC, and that is
Right.
around, some aspects of the regulatory status of, some sales of XRP in the past, right? So, and it's still not clear. For example, the SEC in the US have not actually come out and made a statement officially as to whether Bitcoin or Ethereum are securities or not, right? They've made an unofficial statement, but they haven't made any actual official guidance on that. So, I think there's still a lot of banks that are kind of a little bit holding back, financial institutions holding back, not quite sure yet whether they can legally transact. And by its very nature, Bitcoins are transnational, right? They're independent, they're global. So what regulatory system do they come under? So how do you actually, deal with these issues?
Yeah, I think that's you're right. I think the regulatory scenario here is going to be one that we have to kind of take a look at, and it's going to be the one that I think eventually opens the floodgates, because there is going to be, whether it's the U.S. or some other major G7 that comes in and says, hey, we're going to start to go in this direction, and blockchain is going to be the future. I think that's the challenge we're facing. But it also is the great opportunity that lies in front of a lot of investors right now who are looking at this as a speculative investment. And that's really kind of the long play, is this eventually is going to supplant, some of these mechanisms and systems. Last question for you. Yeah. Future of XRP and its developers, anything specific that you're really excited about, in the 5-year horizon for XRP?
5 years is a long time in blockchain, right? So that's a hard one going that far in advance. But I would say the upcoming Hooks Amendment, I think, is really interesting. There's a lot of stuff happening with NFTs. Like I mentioned, there's actually a new NFT standard being proposed for the XRP Ledger that gives some additional functionality for NFTs on the XRP Ledger and gives them the same kind of sort of first-class status as other currencies on the XRP Ledger. So those are the kinds of things, I think, kind of going forward. And also the look at things like central bank digital currencies and stable coins. I think that's the area as well. As this regulatory clarity evolves, I think more and more are going to be moving into that kind of area. We've also, as well, Ripple have just recently run a developer grant program. And so we have been looking to fund a lot of different projects, and there's been some amazing projects that have come through on that yet. We've not awarded the grants yet. We're still in the process of that. But just to say, the diversity of thinking there and the different applications people have come up with is really quite astounding. So I'm really looking forward to, when we can kind of announce more about that.
Yeah, that's going to be fun. I definitely want to keep close contact with you to hear more about that, because that excites me too, because I see a lot of these kinds of projects really start to group in a lot of pretty amazing brains when you look at where opportunity kind of is starting to really evolve. And I feel like this has been, I was around when the internet was created. I was around when the social media was first spawned. And I feel like that's where blockchain is right now. It's in that cycle of just massive innovation.
Yeah.
And we just don't know what we don't know yet. And I think that's going to be the fun thing that we're going to get a chance to build out over the next few years.
Exactly.
Always great to have you. This is amazing, Matt. Thank you so much for stopping in today. Good insights for our XRP community. And I think this is a good one they'll want to watch. But thanks for stopping in. We appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.
Excellent. All right, you guys are tuned in over on the podcast right now. Make sure and give us some likes and some stars. We love that feedback. If you want to leave a note there, that's a great place to do it. Also, here on YouTube, of course, you can just subscribe and, of course, hit the bell for more notifications of content just like this. If you have an idea that you want us to cover or deep dive, much like getting XRP on today, was really driven by you, the audience. It was your DMs, your comments, your emails. All of that works, guys. It really does. It helps us direct our research. It helps us direct our editorial projects and how we go about getting people in. So just send it to me or over to our producers at revernetworks.com. You can also hit me up on Twitter at Paul Barron. I'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.